Welcome, everybody, to another author chat on the podcast. And today I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Fonda Lee. She's the World Fantasy and three-time Aurora Award-winning author of the epic urban fantasy series, The Green Bone Saga, including Jade City, which I have a copy of here, as well as the sequels, Jade War and Jade Legacy, which was just released. She's also the author of the science fiction novels Zeroboxer, Exo, and Crossfire. Fonda was a former corporate strategist and a black belt martial artist who loves action movies and Eggs Benedict, and I very much love Eggs Benedict as well. And to top it all off, she's a fellow Canadian. But like me, she chose to live elsewhere. How are you doing, Fonda?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Adrian.
Very happy to have you here. Starting off, I want to give you a heartfelt congratulations for the release of Jade Legacy and the conclusion of the Green Bone Saga. So how are you feeling about all that, and how's everything going?
It is. It feels pretty unbelievable, honestly. It's been a quite the long journey. I mean, when you're writing a trilogy that's this big, there are a lot of times during the process when you feel like uh, it's impossible that is this thing ever going to be done. And so reaching that point where it's out in the world and it's now in readers' hands, it's just super satisfying. It's also kind of sad because I've spent a lot of time with these characters, a lot of time in this world, and it's that, I guess it's that satisfaction and almost like a sense of loss when you start at like the bottom of a mountain and you climb to the top of a mountain, and then you're like, huzzah! And then you there's this there's this sort of exhaustion, relief, pride, happiness, sadness. Yeah, there's a lot of emotions.
And then at the same time, you think, oh crap, I have to go back down the mountain.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, where do I go from here? But how is life in general lately? Are you feeling good about the release? And are you looking forward to that post release um, cool down where you can bask in the glory of having finished a trilogy and then think about the future?
Yeah, I am definitely looking forward to relaxing a little bit. And over the holidays, I'm going to just decompress, and that is going
Yeah.
to be great. Uh, there, there's definitely a sense of um, anxiety and excitement over starting something new, and there's this all of a sudden there's this freedom because every idea that I've had really well during the years that I was writing the Green Bone Saga, I was like, that's a cool idea, but like can't worry about that now. Got to finish the books on
Yeah.
contract. So I've just been shoving everything else aside and backburnering all my other ideas, and now I get to pull those out and figure out what I want to do next. So there's there is a I think like this launch period has been interesting because we're sort of in this state in the world right now where like some things are in person, a lot of things are still virtual, and so I for a long time didn't know what my release would look like, whether or not I'd be doing book events. So it has ended up being a bit of a hybrid in that some of my events are in person and I'm doing a virtual tour. So a lot of things to juggle, but I'm just hoping that that people know the book is out there and pick it up. And it's been really satisfying to see the people who've read the first two and have been waiting for the third and getting it. And that's that it just feels like this culmination of like, oh, I can finally get this to you guys.
Yeah, because it's for me personally, this is at this point now that I've finished Jade Legacy, I finished the whole trilogy. It's just kind of cemented itself in my brain as one of my all-time favorite fantasy series. And I think back on it, and the person who introduced it to me was Nicholas Eames, author of
Another fellow
Kings of the
Canadian.
Wild, and he exactly,
Yeah.
and he just tossed it out there. He's like, "Hey man, I think you'd like this. It's really cool, set in a city, martial arts, jade magic, blah blah blah." And then I read it and I just fell in love with it. And now I have the opportunity doing the podcast, doing these interviews, blogging as well, that I can share it with people and just genuinely put my love for the series out there and tell people like, hey, I like it. At least give the first book a try and see what happens. Now there's people at the blog who've read the book. Other friends of mine who have read it and been like, oh man, I can't wait to finish it. And I'm like, I'm so jealous that you got to read the third book already. So
Well, I'm just super grateful for all of that because this series really has been a word of mouth series, and it's I've spoken at times of how it's not a traditional fantasy series, so it's not
mhm,
easy to compare it to other stuff, or to kind of explain what it is initially, and it really has grown exactly how you described, just by people saying to their friends, "Hey, try this out," and it feels like it's been this slow burn to the point where there's a group of avid readers who are waiting for the third book,
mhm.
and that was certainly um, not something that I wasn't sure would happen because when I was writing the first book, I was like, I don't have any comps for this book, and um, is it going to sell? Like, is anyone going to like this besides me? So I'm really glad to hear that you enjoyed the finale.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. When I recommend it to friends, it's like obviously when you're getting into comp stuff, it's for anyone listening who doesn't know, it's like comparison titles when book publishers are trying to market a book. Um, for me, it's always kind of boiled down to like Hong Kong action films meets The Godfather, and if that doesn't sell you, then it's like I don't know what else to say. But like if that
Right.
really excites you, then you're in for a fucking ride because like go for it, you know. Well, I'm getting into um, the series and what influenced it. Do you want to dive into your reading history a little bit? What was your relationship with reading or writing and SFF and all that kind of stuff growing up?
Yeah. I have been a SFF reader pretty much since I could read. I was very much a bookwormy sort of kid.
Hmm.
Stayed in the library long past school hours and um, read like just a lot of uh, fantasy, even as soon as I could really start doing so. So I remember getting really into Narnia and Chronicles of Prydain, all of those series. And then later on, of course, discovering writers like Asimov and Anne McCaffrey and Bradbury and all of those. So, Tamara Pierce when I was a kid too. So a lot of spec fic from early on, and started writing my first novel in fifth grade
Oh
and
wow.
wrote it on the bus, because I had a really boring bus ride. It was like a 45-minute bus ride, and in Calgary
Wow.
winter too. So it was there was very little to occupy me, and so I wrote this story about this dragon on a magic quest with a lot of like assorted forest friends, and um, that I had kind of caught the writing bug. And so I was writing what just for fun and all throughout really my memory of growing up. I wrote a novel when I was in high school and printed it out and bound it and like gave it away to my high school classmates when we graduated because it was a sort of like a pulp superhero story in which I cast all of my classmates as the characters. So like my best friend got turned into a cyborg, and then like my other best friend and I like got these superpowers so we could like fly, and like this other friend of mine became like this like evil tycoon. So like it was this crazy pulpy thing, and I turned that into my sort of senior year project. Um,
That
and
sounds
yet
so cool though.
it's it was so weird
So
thinking back on
nerdy,
it.
but
It's
yeah.
so nerdy. Oh gosh. And then but yet I never really envisioned myself having a profession as a writer. I remember at one point telling my parents, I want to be a writer. And they were like, that's nice. Make sure you go to college and get a job that's going to support you. So I did. I went to college and studied business, which my English teacher was just furious at me for. She was like, you're going to study finance? You're not going to write? Like, she's so mad. One day I wish I could like go back to, Mrs. Carson, if you are listening, I'm really sorry. And I came back around and you were right the whole time. So she really was like, you have a talent in writing. You should be an English major. You should write. And I was like, English major? What am I going to do with an English major? So I had a whole,
I was an English major, so. And look at how I turned out.
See, Mrs. Carson would be proud of you, taken. Not me.
Hey, Miss Carson, shout out to you.
Yeah, exactly. So I ended up having a decade-long business career. I majored in business and went to work on Bay Street in Toronto. And then later on in corporate strategy, and just basically put my writing aside for years. And I'm, you can probably relate to this. You hit this point in your life where you're like, what am I doing? What do I really want to do? Like how am I'm feeling kind of like dissatisfied, and there's something else out there. I don't really know what it is. And so I actually did like this whole career visioning exercise, and it was part of like it was actually for my day job. So I was at this point in my career where I needed to like figure out what position I was going to go into next in the company. So, I had to be like, I sort of had to make a decision. Well, do I want to go into marketing? Do I want to try and go into general management? Like what path do I want to take? And I did this whole career visioning thing, and they asked me all these deep questions. Like, what did you most enjoy doing when you were a child? And like, what has always come easiest to you? And when are you most happy? Like all these,
so
soul searching questions,
wow.
So existential. And and the result of this was like, I want to quit my day job and become a science fiction and fantasy author. So I don't think that corporate visioning exercise really paid off the way that like my boss at the time would have expected it to. But it really was like an epiphany for me, and it took many more years to kind of get there, because you don't generally just be like, I'm a writer now. I mean, there was a whole transition process where I was working my day job and I managed to cut back the hours in order to be able to start writing regularly and taking writing classes. And then when I had a full manuscript, I was trying to get published. And also I had small children at that time. So that whole period of my life is just a complete blur. Like the ages when my son was 2, my daughter was 5, and I was working full time, and I was trying to like pick up writing again. And it's all just like, I would like drop them off at like swim class, and I would have like 25 minutes, and I would just be sitting in my car trying to do some writing. And then like I'd have to shut the laptop and hustle in and collect my kids. And so yeah, it was just a blur. But now I look back on it and I think, wow, I was actually remarkably efficient. I mean, I didn't sleep much, but like I was a really efficient writer at that time because I had so many constraints. I also had none of the obligations that I have as an author professionally now, in terms of dealing with my publisher and editing and and promotion and teaching and all publicity and all of that stuff. So it was just like whatever little moments of time I could carve out of my life to write. That's what I did. So I wrote a novel that I wrote a novel that was sort of a practice novel. Then I wrote another novel that I queried that got some interest but didn't get an agent. Then I wrote my debut novel, which which was my first published novel. And then and it was a small press, small deal, and uh, gave me just enough um, hope that I could do it
Yeah.
again. So I did, and then I got a two-book deal and was writing that, and I was also even in this. This is when, while I was writing those books, I was also coming up with the idea for Jade City, and working on that. That took me a few years. So yeah, one thing led to another, and it has definitely uh, it's been a journey, and really feel pretty fortunate
Yeah.
that I'm able to do this.
I mean, it sounds like it. That I mean, props to you for, you know, using that um I guess, like, what's your future at this company kind of moment to realize this isn't my dream, and then pursue your dream. And then after that, manage to find time within everything, having two kids, working that job, and then also finding the time to write is very, very admirable. And as a fellow parent, I respect that so much. And, all that kind of stuff, like with years and years and years of work and patience and persistence, that kind of stuff does pay off. I think it's a good model to anybody out there who thinks, I'm doing something that I don't love, but what I really want to do is write or anything creative. If you find the time for it, your kids are at a swim meet and you find 25 minutes in the car, just go for it. Do what you want to do, make time for it. And eventually something can happen if you're invested enough, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I tell this to beginning writers, aspiring writers a lot, which is, and it's that um, there are every single professional writer that I can think of will tell you that, like, they know so many others who kind of started off um, around the same time, or that they knew, who were more talented as writer, um, but that didn't continue. And the ones who end up as professional writers are the ones who just didn't quit. It's not about being the most talented writer, or I mean, there's certainly a huge element of luck in the business, but it's not who you know. No, it really is. Um, it really is just kind of grit, just sort of stick to itiveness.
Yeah. Yeah. Just keep going at it. And eventually, you can write an award-winning trilogy and quit your day job and pursue writing full time. And it's like it is possible. And I've seen it just through friends of mine. I've also just heard the stories of so many different authors and been amazed at, like, yeah, a lot of it comes down to grit and a lot of it comes down to passion. It's like if you're passionate about this stuff, then just go for it. Put your heart into it. And like you, it's like your passion and your soul reflects in the work that you produce, because it's like you read the Green Bone Saga and it feels like something that somebody put love and time into. It's not just like, oh, here's the soulless cash grab, you know. There you go. Have fun. It feels like something that um, reflects your interests and your dedication and your research and um, your craft as well, like the actual um, writing itself and how you put sentences together. All of that works, and every single writer out there in the world has spent time balancing all these different aspects in order to produce something that they're happy with, that they're passionate about. So yeah, I'm very um humbled and amazed at your journey, because it sounds very genuine. And I think a lot of people um don't necessarily catch that uh like you say, that genuine trajectory that comes with starting from zero and then making your way towards a position where you do have more recognition. And people tend to focus more on the, you know, recognition phase as opposed to what came before and all the bullshit that people have to put up with and all the struggle and heartache and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You know, there's that myth of the overnight success, right? Like you don't see everything that goes into the overnight success. People just sort of see the overnight success. They don't see the like 10, 20 years that happened before that. And it's really, thank you for saying that the Green Bone Saga feels like it's something I put my heart and soul into, because um, it really is, and it is, and I think what's important when you start out on a journey as a writer is that nothing is guaranteed. You cannot be guaranteed that you will get an agent, that you will get a book deal, that your book will do well, that you will get a second book deal. None of that is guaranteed at all. And so the only thing that you are guaranteed is that you can write a book that you will be happy with. That's it. And so you have to write for yourself first. It has to be a book that you're going to love, even if it is, if it doesn't sell, if you're the only person who ever gets to read it, if it's something that you still enjoy reading and you can look at it and be proud of it, then that's the minimum, that you can control, that you can ask for.
Exactly. And you mentioned earlier you went through different stages of um, being published. So you published your first book that was with a smaller press, then you published a 2-book deal, and then you just finished up with the Green Bone Saga
This
with
huge
Orbit.
trilogy. I'm a little bit worried
Exactly.
about the trajectory, because according to this trend, I'm next going
Four
to
books
do
is
like
coming
a
up.
5-book series or like 7 books. So I was very worried about this, which is why actually after I finished the Green Bone Saga, I wrote a novella, and then I wrote another novella, because I was like, I need to stop this train in its tracks and reset, write something short. So yeah, I we'll see
It's just like
what.
a short story collection, God damn it. Just like
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's very satisfying.
Yeah, don't let yourself get to the point of like, yeah, I'm just going to do what Robert Jordan did and write
Yeah. I don't have enough.
14.
I
Well,
don't have time.
yeah.
It'll take me so long.
Well, looking back on your publishing journey, what do you reflect on from the early days of a Zeroboxer, and then now coming to the end of the Green Bone Saga, that really sticks out to you, whether it's working with editors and publishers and marketing departments and all that kind of stuff? What are some of like the highlight moments for you? And how do you feel now about um, your publishing, your relationship within this world and with Orbit, for example?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to unpack there, because there's no. I guess the first thing I'll say is that there is no predictable career trajectory, and it's very hard to um, base your career off of like anyone else's career when it comes to creative profession, because so much is up to uh, I mean, each book is different. Every publisher that I have worked with has been different. I've had multiple editors, and they have each improved my work immensely, and in different ways, had very different styles. Um, and I also, in a sense, I debuted twice, because I debuted with Zeroboxer, in which was categorized as a young adult novel, and that actually was not a foregone conclusion either, because when I wrote that book, it fell kind of in between young adult and adult, and the adult publisher said, "Well, it feels kind of young. It feels a bit young." And the young adult publisher says, "It feels kind of adult." And so it ended up with a YA imprint that decided to publish it even though it's like on the upper end of YA, and we did a little bit of revision to it. And so that's kind of, I ended up in YA as a result of that. So I fortunately had other ideas that would fit in that category and genre. And but at the same time, I was working on Jade City, so that was my adult fantasy debut, and that brought me to like a very a bigger publisher, a different publisher, and so in a sense, I did get to debut twice. And um, and one thing I will say is like, not only is every book different, it doesn't actually get any easier. Like you think that, oh, if you've, I remember after writing
Mhm.
my first book, I was like, okay, I know how to do this now. No, no, you don't. Like you
Yeah.
only ever know how to write the book that you've already written, because every book is, it's like kids. Like you think you know what you're doing, but then you get the second kid and they're completely different. And so um, I I think that I certainly feel like I'm in a good spot having finished the Green Bone Saga, and I have options for what I can do next, and that's really reassuring, because now at this point I've done young adult, I've done adult, I've done some comics, so there's different things that I could do, um, and I also uh, can have some. Um, I guess I have more experience, having put all these books out, as to what I really stand for as an author and my brand, and that's something I think you develop only through time and figuring it out gradually, and sometimes by chance, depending on where you see success and where your readership is. So yeah, it's always a choose your own adventure, and at each sort of different stage, you've got to make decisions. Like for example, right now I'm in a spot where I'm trying to decide, okay, well, what is my next series, and um, how do I write something that will bring the Green Bone Saga readership with me, but is also fresh and different, and is going to stretch me in a different way creatively, professionally. So those are considerations that you start having once you're established. Well, before you're published, you can just write whatever. I mean, nobody's asking for anything from you, so you can jump all over the place. And now I have a lot of other considerations to sort of all bake together.
Yeah, I think you've, you know, over the course of everything that you've done, you haven't necessarily pigeonholed yourself into a specific category, genre, classification, what have you. Like you mentioned, you've got YA, you've got adult fiction, you've got fantasy, you've got science fiction. The Greenbone Saga is urban fantasy, so that even has more modern elements, and it doesn't feel um, too classic swords and orcs kind of stuff. But you have a lot of flexibility at this point to like you say, uh, spread your wings and stretch your talents to new avenues that hopefully bring in the readership that you've developed over the course of this trilogy and the books that you've written previously. Um, but not necessarily like it has to be the same thing, because I really respect writers who can provide that flexibility to themselves in order to cross genre boundaries and um, do so in such a way where it doesn't feel forced. It feels like a natural extension of their writing, but it just so happens to apply in different genres and work really well in different contexts and different stories. And each story is a unique beast. So I'm really excited to see what comes in the future with your work, just based on everything that you've done before.
Well, me too. I'm also very interested.
Oh man. Well, digging into your personal history a little bit more, I want to talk about a couple things. First up is Dune, because I know you're a big Dune fan. So, what's your relationship with Dune, and then what did you think of the new movie?
So Dune is a book that I didn't read when I was young, but that I read early on in my writing journey. So back when I was just sort of starting to become serious about writing and trying to get published, um, Dune is an inspiration for me because it is um, it combines of the best things that I loved about epic fantasy and science fiction. So it has the science fictional setting and milieu and cool tech and ornithopters and just so many cool science fiction elements. And it has also got this clash of noble houses, Shakespearean tragedy, chosen one, but also subversion of chosen one um, themes to it. Uh, and so it is, it influenced me because I thought, hey, you don't have to. Dune is like the perfect example um, of telling like a big story. And Dune is a big, the scope of it is big, and yet it's also very focused and it's also very character driven. Um, and it's got it's this epic fantasy feel, but on a planet, and there's economics and organized religion and colonialism and like big meaty themes. So it was a book that kind of did it all. Um, and and I love the new movie. Is the answer?
I did too.
Yeah,
I did
I've been
too.
excited. Yeah, I've been excited for a long time, and then um, uh, yeah, it was so good.
Yeah, we recently did a spoiler cast reviewing the movie, and yeah, personally, I adored it. It had some flaws, but not enough that I was completely pulled out of it or anything. And my wife was sitting next to me, and just she's never seen anything Dune related. She's never read the books before, and I was impressed because she wasn't asking that many questions. And I had it in the back of my head, like she's gonna ask me so much during the course of this movie. But enough was choreographed visually and through the story and the characters and action and scenes and all that kind of stuff that
Yeah,
she didn't. And I was very impressed. I was like, cool. I was almost as impressed on that perspective
that
as much
front,
as the
right,
movie itself. So
right,
yeah.
right. How do you take something that has such immense world building and then introduce it really smoothly and bring along people who have never experienced the book, and also people who are like longtime fans of the book and are going to um, are going to be scrutinizing it, right? So it had a lot to live up to, but I had a lot of faith because I really liked Denis Villeneuve's previous movies. Like I loved Blade Runner 2049. Yeah, oh, so good. Arrival, so good. Sicario,
Yes.
so good. So I had faith.
There was one movie that he made, Prisoners, which was actually amazing with Hugh Jackman,
Oh,
and
that's one
that
I
movie
haven't
that movie
seen.
watch it please. It's
Okay,
so
okay.
so good. It's different.
Oh, I
It's suburban,
absolutely
but it
will.
has the
Okay.
same
It
it has the
has
same tightness of something like
okay.
Sicario.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and he has a certain style. I mean, it's a very you're in a Denis Villeneuve film, and I think some people bounce off of his style. I personally love it, so that may factor
Yeah, me
into
too.
people's reactions too.
And something else I wanted to touch on, the Godfather
Mhm.
trilogy, the movies, but also the books by Mario Puzo. But we can also rope in other films within like the gangster crime drama kind of thing. Like, what's your um, what's your relationship with that kind of stuff like, and how did that really pull you in and affect you?
So um, you can no doubt tell that the Green Bone Saga is influenced by a lot of crime drama, both Western media, like Scorsese films, of course, The Godfather, right, uh, and also Eastern crime drama, and like Johnny Toe um, films, John Woo films starring Chow Yun Fat. Like, there really there was an influence on both cultural lenses from that genre. The thing that drew me to evoke the Godfather in the Green Bone Saga is the family story element. So I've watched plenty of crime dramas and gangster films, mafia stories, and I think what draws me to them is the sense of there's this there's this theme of kind of um, family and brotherhood and honor among men who have very violent lives, and so there's a lot of potential for action and pathos and sudden turns of fortune. And The Godfather, in particular, in my mind, is not a story about gangsters or a story about crime. It's a story about family. Just the family happened to be gangsters, and that um, is something that's part of the feel that I wanted to evoke with the Green Bone Saga. The clans in the Green Bone Saga, despite my use of all of these crime drama tropes, they're not actually criminal organizations. Um, they're legitimate in their own country, and they have a lot of influence. The reason I set the world up that way is I didn't want this to be a cops versus robbers story. I didn't want the clans to be illegal and to have an entire like law enforcement plot to the story. That wasn't the story I wanted to tell. I wanted to highlight the fantasy and the um, the family saga. So the organization of the clans feels very gangster-ish and is clearly based on on organized crime organizations in the way that they operate. But there's not actually a crime drama storyline. What there is a uh, a story of family legacy, and that really is part of the appeal of Godfather, and especially like I felt like it was encapsulated the best in The Godfather Part Two, where you've got the parallel storylines between Vito Corleone as a young man coming to America and Michael Corleone and him trying to protect and save his father's empire. Um, so uh, so that element plus like just all um, the things that you'd expect in a great gangster film, like dark alleyways and men smoking in clubs and luxury cars and submachine guns and deals done on the docks and all of those
And
aesthetics.
assassinations.
Yeah,
So many
exactly. Sudden
assassinations.
assassinations and car bombs, and I mean all of that, factored into the Green Bone Saga, and I very deliberately wove that
Hmm.
into the narrative.
If you can feel that, you can feel that family drama energy pulsating throughout the series. The influence is there from all these different crime dramas and Hong Kong cinema and what have you. But like you say, this is a family story, a family saga about legacy and all these different things and how everything intersects and conflicts within that that family drama. And I'm curious how exactly the Green Bone Saga, how Jade City came to be. Like, what was the initial spark, or how did it all come to fruition in your mind?
It was very much uh, vibes. So I did not have characters. I didn't have a plot. I just had the title. I just had Jade City, and it came about partially as a form of wish fulfillment because I also love martial arts films and the wuxia genre, and like I would watch these movies in which the martial arts masters like could punch through concrete and like jump over walls. And as a martial artist, I was like, this is just false advertising. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no way I'm never going to be able to do that. So this is clearly magic. Um, but why? How? I mean, it can't just be training. There's got to be something magical, like, because I can't fly through the bamboo forest. What the heck? So, so I said, okay, well, what's the magic that makes all this make sense? And if, there's been lots of fantasy with magic stones, crystals, diamonds, weapons, right? There's magic items galore in epic fantasy. And I thought, from an Eastern tradition, jade is the most valuable substance. And so that's going to be it. That's the magic item. And if you wear it, that's how you can do all these awesome things that the kung fu heroes in my favorite martial arts movies can do. Um, and and then it just like the sort of the vibes, and then I had that, and I also was inspired by the fact that a lot of the organized crime in Asian organized crime, like the triads especially, sprang out of martial traditions and a nationalistic history. And they started off as these secret societies that were patriotic, that were trying to repel foreign rule. Um, Before they evolved into current day organized crime outfits. And so
Yeah, and
that
this is similar with
sort of there's
the
that
Yakuza in
myth.
Japan as well.
Exactly, yeah. And so the mythology of organized crime, plus my love of that genre, plus epic fantasy, and so it all just kind of like became. I just had the vibe. It was just like I've nothing else. Just like the premise, a feeling for what the world is going to be like, and I left it alone. I wrote in my notebook, Jade City. Um, eh, I called it like a modern wuxia gangster saga, and then wrote like, I have no characters, I have no plot, don't know where this is going, and then left it alone for like 2 years because I didn't
Yeah,
know what to do with it. And it was such a big idea. I knew it was going to be extremely intensive world building. And this is another thing that, talking about a writing career. Sometimes your big idea is the one that you're not ready to write yet. Like I came up with the
exactly.
idea for Jade City before I had published my debut. And I just wasn't ready to write it yet. It was going to be this big epic, and I knew it was going to be an adult novel with multiple point of view characters, multiple books most likely. And I sort of said I need time to build my writing skills. I need to get
Exactly.
good enough. So when I did finally start writing it, it was still daunting, but I had a couple books under my belt, and I'd
You had more
learned to
skills,
write. I
and yeah,
did, and I mean, I also had written books where there was a single POV character, so I knew how to write a tight narrative, and I think that helped me transition into writing one with a lot more points of view, because I still carried in the intent to like be pretty tight about it. Um, and not let like it kind of sprawl out of control, and focus it on the main character. And just in this case, the main character is the Cull family, and every point of view character is a lens into that family. And that's how I thought about the series when I was writing.
And I think that that approach that you just mentioned of the tightness of a single POV book that you've written, but applying that to tight single POV characters within the Call family to sort of like give different perspectives, but each of them is written in such a way where um, it feels intimate, and then you get that intimacy in relation to the other characters and everything that's going on within the narrative. But you also apply that, I think, very well to the expanding scope of the series. So Jade City starts out more tightly focused on the city of Kanlun, which is or Janlun, sorry, which is the capital of Kekon. And then from there, everything that happens in Jade War, the second book, things start to expand overseas, and you have more international plots, but also Kekon itself is becoming uh, more wrapped up in the goings on of other countries and their political machinations. And then Jade Legacy broadens that scope even further with um, the international scope, but also the way that you play with time jumps. And
Hmm.
I think it takes place over the course of almost like 30 years. Um, and all of it feels natural, and it feels good because of the way that you approach the characters, and because the intimacy that you feel with the characters and the way that you wrote their POV chapters. It doesn't feel jarring in any way. Um, so I applaud you for that, first of all. But I'm also very curious how you approached the overarching narrative of the series as a whole, and at which point that kind of came into your mind to think like, this is a trilogy, this is how far it expands.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It really came into mind as a trilogy after I wrote Jade City. So I knew, well, I did not have any idea if Jade City would be published while I was writing it. And I knew that it could easily be more than one book. I knew there was more story to tell. But I had to write the first book in a way that was satisfying and that came to a conclusion, so that if that was all I ever got to publish, it was still a worthwhile read. And then when the book sold, and my publisher came back and said, "We want 3 books," I was like, "Great!" And now I have to figure out what they are. And so that's when I sat down and mapped out how the story would work across 3 books. And um, I already knew that, the focus of the story was the family saga and the conflict between these 2 clans. That was kind of the spine of this book, was the mountain versus no peak, and the story of the Call family. And what I did that helped me make each book distinct was I created a scaffold, because I do believe each book in a trilogy has to have its own character and be satisfying in its own right, and that together they make this one uber narrative. Um, and Jade City, like you mentioned, has this tight storyline, takes place in the city of John Loon. And with Jade War, I take that conflict between the clans and I expand it internationally. And then in Jade Legacy, I expanded intergenerationally. And the that to in, my intent was that each book then has a certain feel to it. If you different hopefully, if I've done my job right, people will have different opinions about which is their favorite book. I think a great trilogy is one in which um, people can disagree about which one is their favorite, because um, you look at a I don't know, a trilogy like, I mean, nobody disagrees about which is the best Matrix movie. You know, like the other two don't compare to the first Matrix movie.
We don't
But
we don't
everyone
know.
has
The
their.
Matrix Resurrections could
We don't know yet.
upend
That is
everything.
true. Very, very true. Trailer looks great. Looks great. But cautious optimism. So,
Exactly.
but like Star Wars, for example, each of those films has a certain feel to it, and people have their favorites. Like there's division
Mhm.
among which is your favorite of the Star Wars films. So that's my hope, is that if you really like that tight clan conflict focused story, you're going to like Jade City the best. If you really love like the seeing the world and the world building in the different countries and cultures, you're going to like Jade War the best. And if you really love the family legacy drama side of the story, you'll probably like Jade Legacy the best. And I knew when I sat down to plan out the trilogy that the arc of the story as a whole is this generation of green bones of the Cull family, and that's why the story it begins really with that generation taking power, Lon recently becoming Pillar, and it ends where it does at the end of Jade Legacy, and the conclusion of that long-standing war between the clans. So that's the sort of the shape of the whole book and of the whole trilogy, and then each book has its own shape.
And I think you also apply that to characters because, by the end of Jade Legacy, you broke my damn heart, but I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody. But um, as certain people will be attached to certain books and sort of scenarios within the series, whether it's the city in Jade City, whether it's the more international feel of Jade War or the more intergenerational feel of Jade Legacy. There's also that same application to characters, and people will attach themselves to certain characters. And I think the way that you focused on this family gave you a lot of flexibility to play with their personalities, play with their relationships with each other, and create genuine, relatable conflict within that. Everyone who has siblings can picture those stupid fucking fights that you have with your sibling that spring out of nothing, but then you also have that with these characters within this organized crime family, or not even crime family, this family, this clan, and they're all fighting with each other in certain ways, but it feels natural within the context of siblings and the rivalries that
Right,
can pop up.
right.
And I'm curious where these different characters came from and how they sort of developed within your mind over the course of Jade City, and then applying that also to Jade War and Jade Legacy.
They came about because I knew that I wanted a cast of really strong sibling characters who, and I wanted this family to be this messy, powerful family, like on the scale of Sopranos, or like the the
In a more
Lannisters, like.
in a more recent example, I think Succession is a
Yes.
perfect
Right, right. I mean,
comparison.
it wasn't out when I was writing it, but now
Yep.
I see and hear a lot of Succession comparisons, because yes, messy, um, powerful alpha family that loves each other and kicks the shit out of each other and fights together and fights with each other, and that just wonderful drama, and that they see the world in different ways. They have different roles in the family. They're very different personalities, but they're under threat. and they have to work together, and they have to put aside those differences, and um and there's always friction between them. There's always love between them, and showing that duality. And they stand in stark contrast to their antagonist, right? So they are, um, compared to the opposing clan, the Mountain Clan. Aitmata is very much the strong woman leader. You know, she comes across as very self sufficient, very in control, and uh,
Cold and
it,
calculating as well.
right, and she has to be in like that sort of position and show no weakness. And but we get the story from the side of the Cull family, where they cannot individually, any one of them can't stand up to Aitmata. So you need the talents, skills, abilities of every member of that family. And that's uh, I started when I was developing them with very broad archetypes, right, that we're all familiar with. The responsible eldest brother, the impulsive middle child, the black sheep in the family, and in I wanted an adopted sibling because I'm really actually partly because I'm very fond of Tom Hagen as a character in The Godfather, and how he was brought into the family even though he's not Italian. I like that idea. So having these, they start out as these characters who just have to fit, they fit certain roles in the narrative. um, and so uh, they begin very broad strokes, and it's in the process of learning about them and developing them as characters that they become fully fleshed out and become much more than that, because we all may fit a particular sort of standard role in our own family, right? Like I'm the eldest in my family, and there's umpteen versions of responsible eldest big brother, right? There's billions of them out there, and they're all individual. So finding starting with kind of their role, and then diving deeper and deeper into who they are as a person and how they interact with each other. And I actually I had times where I had like these maps of the characters. I'd have like characters on the sheet, and I'd draw arrows between them to figure to um, develop and figure out the relationships between every member of the family. So I'd be like, well, what's Andon's relationship to Shay? What's his relationship to Hilo? What's his relationship to Lon? So, and then equally so for all of them. And then I would make sure that there were scenes in which we see every permutation of their interactions. So there's a scene in Jade War where Andon is with Wen, and I that is a great scene, and it came about because I realized, we haven't seen Andon and Wen together. And what is it like when they're together? Like they are both in their own way, the uh, disadvantaged members of the family, uh, and they're unlucky in Kekanese culture. So they share that. And what do they talk about? What are they like together? So that sort um, of uh, development, um, and making sure that like all those characters get to interact with each other, ideally allows you to see every character through every other character's point of view. And I think that makes them feel more real, because every character has a slightly different point of view of every other character.
Hmm. And you touched really nicely on the sense of character development and relationships within the context of opposing viewpoints. But I'm also curious how you found a balance. In a lot of crime dramas and gangster films and The Godfather, for instance, there's a ton of moral complexity and moral grayness. how did you strike that balance between making them relatable and also giving them context within the family and their relationships, but also their violent world and the often brutal things that many of them do, often by choice?
Yeah. I don't think of my characters as morally gray. I think of the world they live in and the culture they inhabit as morally gray. So they are always under pressure. And they are making these decisions that we might look at from our safe vantage point of 21st century uh, Western democracy, and be like, oh my god, that's horrible. But I would hope, if I've done my world building and my character world work well enough, that you get so immersed in their life and uh, their culture and context, that like you see where they're coming from. Even the worst decisions that they make, even the most violent moments, you understand why they're doing it and why, in their mind, it's necessary. And so they live. It's a function of the world I created for them, one in which there is a great deal of clan loyalty, honor, violence, machismo, this patriarchal society, one in which warrior ethos is celebrated and like held above almost anything else. And Jade is coveted, and Jade is won by prowess, and also foreign influences and threats from outside have made them a very also isolated, insular culture, one with a lot of xenophobia. So they work in a world that has a lot of. I mean, I really like to put my characters in positions where it feels like they're in a pressure cooker and there aren't any good choices. And so if a character decides they have to duel because that's the only way they can uphold their reputation or their family honor, or the strength, the appearance of strength in their clan, that might seem like, in hindsight, a terrible idea. But also, it was also should feel inevitable. Like it had to go down this way.
And contextually, it feels, um, it feels right. It it's not necessarily like, oh, I like this character, and therefore they have to make choices that I agree with. They can
Right.
conflict with your ideals and your values, but that also
Yeah.
makes them engaging characters. And I think your world building also acts as a foil for the characters because, like you say, this culture exists in such a way where machismo and honor and respect for the clan and all these different kinds of things permeates society in so many ways and so deeply. Actually, back in May, I think it was May, you did a world building workshop with Flying Books,
Yeah.
like a Toronto bookshop, and I attended that. It was like a virtual workshop. Um, but could you expound upon that a little bit? Like, what's your approach to world building, and how did you apply it within the world of Kekon and
Oh
and
gosh.
and the
World
broader?
building is such a huge topic that I could talk about. I mean, I have talked about it, for entire day
That
long.
was a 2 day workshop, but
Yeah, exactly. I'll just
if you could
give you the highlights of this 2-day workshop. um,
spark
you know,
notes.
yeah, I mean, I love world building, and I actually I did a stint as a guest instructor on the Writing Excuses podcast that's focused on world building, and one of the I think main principles um, that I talk about when I talk about world building is that what's important to as a writer, the most important thing to build is the world that your characters know. So everything about the world is filtered through the lens of your characters. And every one of us in our world, right? We all live in different worlds based on our our background, our economic status, our gender, our race, our nationality, our position in our family, our education level, like all those things influence our experience of the world. And that's the same goes true is true for fictional characters as you can you can't uh, you separate world from character and and world from plot and plot from character. Like those are the three stools of your story, and the world, plot, and character all have to work together and reinforce each other. And and the other thing that I say quite a bit about world building um, is that my goal as a world builder when I'm writing my stories is I want the world to feel lived in, and I want it to feel um, as real as I can make it. And I hope that like John Loon in particular feels like a place that you can get on an airplane and you can go there and walk down the street and go to the Twice Lucky and eat the crispy squid balls. And the way that I achieve that is through specificity. And that is like everything from naming the luxury cars and the districts in the city, and what they're eating for dinner, and all those little things. The idioms that they use, the little superstitious customs that they have. The way the air feels during the season. All those little things like that that you can imagine yourself noticing in if you were to visit any country, um, is a lot more important than the maps that you make and the rivers and lineage
Exactly.
of kings and all that. It's the texture of the world.
And there's a certain aspect you mentioned specificity, but I think what you do is um, you offer specificity, but it doesn't linger longer than it needs to. So there's certain things like food. I props to you for including food so enthusiastically throughout the series, but you never delve too deeply into the food. You mentioned smells and certain things. You'll throw it out there like ginger pork or something like that, but immediately it's just two words, ginger pork, and in my mind I'm like, oh god, I'm just thinking back to the Chinese restaurants in Vancouver that I used to go to. All these different things, little touches here and there, and like you say, they have um physical uh habits and things that are just ingrained into their society, but that applies beyond Kekon as well. You have the Espenians who
Hmm.
are more or less like an analog to the United States or Britain. And they have a religion called the One Truth, and the followers of the Truth Bearers, and a lot of them wear necklaces. And when they get into a situation that conflicts with their values, they'll put their hands on their necklaces and like kiss it, or just small little details like that. But
Hmm.
the way that you include it, there is specificity in terms of the action itself, but it never overstays its welcome and feels like something that you're pushing in the reader's face as a detail that you have to notice this. It's ingrained within the narrative in such a way that feels normal based on the POV character and how they view the world. So it's like you say, there's this trifecta of world and narrative and characters and how they all interact with each other. And I thought you handled that super well throughout the series. And Kekon
Thank
feels like a
you.
place I would want to visit. Like I want to go there and check it out.
I'm really glad to hear that, because that was definitely my intention. When it comes to world building, uh, I take a lot of cues from cinema because I love film, as you know, and in cinema, the filmmaker has the advantage of set design and costume design, and all the stuff is not lingered on. It's just there. So the characters are having a conversation, advancing the plot, doing whatever they need to do. And all the stuff is passing by in the background, is just osmosing into your brain. Like they don't,
Cetra.
yeah, exactly. Like you immediately have the cameras there, and you immediately see that this is 1960s nightclub, and you don't have to say anything. As a filmmaker, it's all in in the shot, and I try to do that in prose. Um, and I cannot in the same way, but I do keep that principle in mind, that what I can do is just have the story happen um, in the world. Like I can have a conversation between these two characters, and instead of having it in a blank space or in the same house that I've been set other scenes, they're at a sporting match, and now the sporting match is happening in the background, and you're still advancing the plot, but you also see some more of the world. Or now you've got this conversation, it happens in the temple, or it happens at the school. And so I just have these characters go around and move, and then it's like, hopefully it is like, the sort of cinematic principle of the world is there, and it's in the background, and it's not taking up the camera, but it's clearly visible.
Mm-hmm. And it immerses you in the world in a way that doesn't seem confrontational. It's much more subtle, like you say, and these things just become ingrained in my head. Like I read about Hilo. Hilo's my boy. I love him, and every time he gets into his Duchess, I just immediately picture him getting into this just like Rolls Royce type car, you know, something that's like a bit a bit understated, or a bit more like elegant in its design, but also flashing his wealth, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just a reflection of the character, and all these different details work to flesh out the characters. But that, I think, something that contrasts that nicely is um the Jade magic, and how within the context of the world and the culture, um the actual fight scenes themselves and the action that takes place, it feels real and it feels fitting for this world. But at the same time, the action feels so visceral that it's like it needs to be focused on, you know it's that kind of thing where it like shifts from a background uh reality of this world, and when it actually um emerges within the story and the context and the characters as a necessity, as something that needs to happen, as you mentioned earlier, based on the inevitability of a character's storyline, it just kind of like bursts through the page, and it feels so gritty. And I'm curious how you took your martial arts background, if you can explain a little bit about your martial arts background, but how you applied that to the way that you put action onto the page and use words to express
Yeah.
something as
Yeah.
fluid as martial arts combat.
Well, I wanted to take those very operatic, very beautiful, high flying, choreographed martial arts sequences in kung fu movies, and apply magic to it, and then make it feel really gritty and dirty and harsh. Like
Hmm.
that was sort of my approach to it, was how do I make it feel grounded? And I think that my martial arts background um, inclined me to that approach, because um, there's the reality is that um, in a fight, and I fortunately am not in real fights, but I've done plenty of sparring and competitive um, situations, and drill and training, and um, it's not pretty. It's very it's kind of a mess. and it's exhausting and painful and
So
usually
sweaty.
open and usually over quickly. Most fights happen very fast, and they can be very startling, very sudden. Um, there's a lot of circumstances that come into play, um, and it's very emotional. And I really um, wanted to kind of that combine the martial arts element with sort of the sort of often very stark and sudden violence in crime dramas and gangster fiction. So um so the jade magic um gives people these cool abilities, but it certainly doesn't shield them from harm. There's plenty of, and I think some readers have been um, either surprised or disappointed that there is not more fighting in the books, because people comment on the fight scenes quite a lot. And so some readers go into the books with this idea that's just going to be nonstop, like wall to wall action from page one
But that
onwards.
would be
And that's
that would
not,
be too much.
it's not what the book is, right? The book is, I think of action scenes, and I love action scenes. I love writing them, but I also want each one to count. I tend to be sparing with them and treat them like high powered explosives. Like when they happen, they better make a really big impact. So the tension that leads up to a big action sequence is really important. And when it happens, like when you actually get to violence, you should be like, holy shit! Like things, this is that I hope at that point that it feels like this is the where it's violence now. Like
Yeah.
there's no other choice. So yeah, that's I think my enjoyment of martial arts cinema kind of colliding with the reality of having studied martial arts and trained in it. You'd be like, okay, how do I take this cool fantasy thing, but then make it feel very, very real?
hmm And at the same time, it's a matter of pacing because a fight, whether it's sparring on the mat or whether it takes place in a dirty alleyway in Janloon, a lot of it is about pacing, and a lot of a lot of fights can go the wrong way because someone reacts too early or reacts too late. But then it also applies to the actual writing level because you want the fight to be impactful and meaningful within the context of the story, but you also have to pace it well with character development and story development and all these different factors. So if it's just constantly boom, 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 we have so many fight scenes and blah, people are going to get exhausted. And it's a trilogy, and each of these books is like 600 plus pages. So just chill out. Yeah. And now that the series is come to an has come to a conclusion with Jade Legacy, have you had some time to reflect on the journey of this series and what it's meant to you in terms of your profession as a writer, but also the relationship that you developed with the characters and this world?
Oh gosh, it doesn't feel quite real that it's over yet because I'm still sort of in the thick of promoting it, and I have a novella that's set in the same world that's coming out next year. So there's still kind of more to come in it, but um, it really. I mean, the Green Bone Saga is it's so meaningful to me. It's kind of hard to put into words because it was such a big project. It was an ambitious project. It's really the one that I'm most known for. That broke me out as a writer, and that I just I really have gotten to know these characters so well that now um, it's almost hard to write any to write new stuff, new characters. I'm like, I don't know these people. Who are these people?
Yeah.
Going back to my family, I know call family well. Um, so so yeah, I've been asked quite a bit, would you return back to this world? Would you do another series in it, or another spin-off, sequels, or anything like that? And I think it's too early to tell. I don't at this point think I will, because I feel very satisfied with how the trilogy came together. As much as uh, I love big stories, I also love big stories that end. I tend to be I'm one of those people who I don't like to start watching TV series until until I know that they have a conclusion. Um and that is really it's important to me that the story is complete, and that people can come to it knowing that it's complete. Um so yeah, I it's going to take me a little bit of time to kind of fully digest, process.
Yeah. But I think your approach is pragmatic, it's a series that you feel satisfied with. And, you know, as a reader, I felt equally satisfied knowing that I started this journey with these characters, got to know them better, read their narratives and invest my time in them really, and that came to a satisfying conclusion. And I don't feel like I need a spin-off or anything like that. You mentioned the novella that you wrote. I think it's called The Jade Setter of John Loon, correct?
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna read that. I'm gonna pick that up, of course. But I think that will just be a nice uh, a nice alternate story to
Yep.
give me a little cherry on top of the three-tiered
Yeah.
green bone cake
That's
kind of
exactly
thing.
what it is. Yeah.
Um, so what can you tell listeners, viewers a little bit about that novella, and what's the latest on that in terms of like release date and
Right now, it's scheduled to come out April of next year, and it is a standalone prequel novella that takes place a few years before Jade City. It has different characters. They are members of the minor clan, the Haido Shield clan, and it's a noir-esque, character-driven mystery. But there will be major cameos by familiar members of the cast. Lon shows up, Hilo shows up, Gaunt Ash shows
awesome.
up, Aimada makes an appearance. So it was really fun to do because I got to inhabit the world of these characters who are not part of the big clans and have to actually account for and maneuver around the power of the big clans. Um, and uh, and also it was short, which was just lovely. After doing Jade Legacy, I was like, wow,
Jade
this.
Legacy is a beast. I think you mentioned in the acknowledgments it's like 250,000 plus words. Yeah, it's hefty. But I think the novella sounds interesting in the sense that I think the Haito Shield, is that the name of the clan?
Yeah.
They came up at certain points throughout the series as like a neutral clan. So like you
Yes.
say, they're in this middle ground, this Kekanese limbo, I guess you could call it, between these two major powers, and you're trying to navigate this space. And at the same time, you get to mix up the genre. You come from a family drama, a family saga, and then you're tightening the lens into this
Yes. It's
mystery
a tight
noir.
little mystery, and it takes
Yeah,
place in the course of like 3 days. Uh,
nice.
yeah. So yeah,
And I think I think
it was a way to play with a new type of story in the same world.
hmm and I think John Loon's the perfect setting for that because I think back to all of these amazing Hong Kong noir movies that I've seen over the course of my life, you know, especially the stuff with Chow Yun Fat in you know, Hard Boiled and that kind of stuff. And I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah,
imagining this
yeah.
really
Better
uh
Tomorrow and The
yeah, yeah,
Killer, and yeah,
just this really tight narrative that takes place over a blistering period of time, and
right.
the mystery just unravels and explodes and shit hits the fan, and I'm
That's
super
pretty much
excited for
exactly what happens.
it. I'm so excited for this. I'm so excited. I was just like trying to remember before the interview all the Hong Kong cinema that I really loved growing up. And you know, there's the Jackie Chan side of things, but when it
Sure.
really comes down to it, it's like Chow Yun Fat is just always in my heart, you know?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Also, I mean, one of my favorite movies is Infernal Affairs.
Yes,
Oh,
yes. If anyone has seen The Departed by Martin Scorsese, please watch Infernal Affairs because
oh,
it's a blatant homage, I'll call it, to Infernal Affairs, where it's taking pretty much
yeah.
every
It's a
story
remake. I
thread.
mean, it is.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I don't know how
I think
explicit of a remake it is, but
right. I mean, it is. It's cool because they take the story of Infernal Affairs and they, put it in with like American
American
Mafia.
packaging.
Yeah, but and The Departed is a much longer film. I feel like Infernal Affairs is it's much more of a tight crime thriller. Um, oh, it's so good. I like
There's
both
no time
movies, but
wasted in that movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so efficient, so tight. Oh, it's great.
Yeah. Well, cool. On this topic, we'll close out with what are you currently reading or watching or listening to, or anything creative that you're engaging with at this moment?
Oh goodness. Right now, I am barely watching or reading anything. I'm, I'm promoting this book, but I am watching Warrior on HBO
Ooh,
Max,
nice.
and
That's the one with
I've
it's a screenplay by Bruce Lee, I think.
yeah, it was inspired by some Hollywood treatments that he did, and it is Chinese tongs in San Francisco, and it is. I've been told by many people it has that they're like it gave me Green Bone Saga vibes. You have to watch it. So I finally did. I started watching it. I'm making relatively slow progress just because I'm not getting a lot of time to binge, but I'm enjoying that.
Nice. And the action in that show is really well done. It's like very well
Yeah, it's
choreographed.
great.
Yeah. And that also has a bit of a, you know, since they're the Tongs in San Francisco, it has a nice contrast between cultural perspectives, you know, coming from China, but also versus American. But then also the fight choreography is super well done in the sense that the the white people and the way that they fight versus the Chinese characters and the way that they fight comes together in this beautiful mashup. And you know, there's like a precision to the martial art styles of the Tongs, but then versus like the white characters who are all about big fists and hard punches. Like such a cool contrast visually. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one episode partway through the first season, which is basically like a western. It was really cool because it's like it was just one episode that felt like like a spaghetti western. Uh, so yeah, no, I'm
But
enjoying. I'm enjoying that.
it fits in, it fits in the context of the show though. So if anyone's listening, it's just like, what does
Yeah,
she mean by that?
right, right. No, it totally fits in the context of the
Yep.
show, but it was pretty cool. And then I mean, I watched a lot of anime over the course of the pandemic, and I'm currently working my way through Code GS, so that's my current anime watch. And then I have an event with another Orbit author, M.A. Carrick, coming up, and so I'm reading a book called The Mask of Mirrors, which I'm enjoying.
What
It's got a lot
what
of
is that about?
political intrigue. I'm not very far into it yet, but it's about a con artist character who infiltrates a noble family, and there's a lot of political intrigue and fashion.
Cool.
and yeah, I'm enjoying that too.
Awesome. I'm going to check that out. I like the idea of a con artist infiltrating a family. That sounds like a plot line that hasn't really been utilized in recent years, or not even. I can't even remember explicitly like anything that does that super well. But that's called Mask of Mirrors. You said
Yeah.
cool. I'm gonna write that down real quick. And Fonda, I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm a big fan of the Green Bone Saga, and after having finished Jade Legacy, I can safely say I'm immensely satisfied with how things came to a conclusion, even though, I was on the verge of tears at times, playing with my emotions is what you did. But can you please tell listeners and viewers where they can find you on social media, but also where they can find out more about your work, where they could pick up books and all that stuff?
Yeah, I'm my website is a good starting point, fondalee.com. You can pick up my books, which anywhere books are sold. Please support your independent bookstores. The audiobook is fantastic. I recently did an event with Andrew Kashino, who's the narrator of the Green Bone Saga audiobooks. Super cool guy, voice actor, has done so many awesome um, voiced so many cool characters, and he does a fantastic job with the audiobooks. So if audiobooks are your thing, I heartily recommend them. You can find me online. I'm at Instagram at fonda.lee and on Twitter at fondajlee. I also have a Patreon where I have been posting additional Green Bone Saga content. I have some short stories that I've put up there, and I do monthly Q&A videos. So, yeah, you can definitely find me. Reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you chatting with me, and all the best, honestly, with the release. And then just enjoy your holidays. Relax. You did an awesome job with this series, so you
Oh, I
deserve
plan to. I've got a massage booked,
it.
a bit of a vacation. It's going to be great.